This is the worst thing that can happen to you. It is literally the worst thing that can happen to you, that you don't know how to actually write a world within the book. You can write it in your own documents, you can write it in your own Wikipedia, but you can't seem to put it into actual book and make it interesting for the readers. Hey, I edit stories. If you want me to edit your story professionally, you can check the channel page and to see how that works. The commissions are quite affordable. But also, if you want me to review a sample of your writing here on the channel, a sample, it's totally free. Drop it down here. I would love to see it. Welcome back. So today we have a submission from, Omari Jenkins, and he submitted many chapters. I read chapter 1 and chapter 2. There is something that I really noticed that I wanted to talk to you. Chapter 1 of this story. Let's talk about it, because I think it's very important. I think it's critical, key information, because many people really should be learning something from this. Now, this story does have problems, but I want to delve into one strength that I have noticed, and it is how fundamentally the world of this story is very interesting, and it is made interesting by basically how can you world build within the book, because we all know the truth of how to world build outside the book. You open a document, you open some sort of a software, you go ahead and you write another, some 50,000 words of world building, huge Wikipedia, and it drags on for months and months. Yeah, we know how to do that. But the question is, how do you actually make your readers interested in your world? How do you actually world build in a book in a way that grabs the readers and gets them interested? I have rarely ever seen people do this. Now, my favorite author for actually achieving this is George R.R. Martin. So I brought this up very quickly, and this is the first chapter that we see in A Game of Thrones with Bran, okay? And it goes, the morning had dawned clear and cold, with a crispness that hinted at the end of summer. They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and Bran rode among them, nervous with excitement. This was the first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his lord father and his brothers to see the king's justice done. It was the 9th year of summer and the 7th of Bran's life. Bran is a summer child. He has spent his entire life of 7 years in summer, okay? And so in this world, fundamentally, here's how it goes, right? How do you do something like this? Because we all know this is fundamentally interesting, okay? This is really very interesting. This opening paragraph is fantastic. We know the main character, Bran. We know where he's going, so it establishes a direction for the story, to see a man beheaded. And we, of course, have read the prologue, and so we know that man, why he's being beheaded, and he has deserted the Night's Watch, and that is punishable by death, of course, yes. And so, of course, it's a very good opportunity for George to establish the world. The tradition of who? Of course, of the, the Starks. They are highly tradition-oriented, very strict bunch of people. So that is a lot of world building from just the man being beheaded, which is a lot of interest in world building. And Bran is riding among them, nervous with excitement, right? And of course, he ends here with, it was the 9th year of summer, right? And so how do you do this? It is like this, okay? So first thing, you want to establish something to jump off of. Basically, the cue. So you need a cue to basically establish your world, to explain to the reader the world that you are building. In this context, it means the cue has to be something that hooks the readers, okay? They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, and Bran rode among them. You see, what's the cue here? For the world building of the Starks, establishing who the Starks are, how tradition oriented they are, is done through the man being beheaded. So that's one cue, and it's a nice hook. It's a very good hook. So the cue has to hook the reader so that when you explain to them, it's not boring because they're already interested. And Bran wrote among them. The second cue in this paragraph is Bran. Bran is the second cue. And he's writing among them. And we use Bran in order to jump off, or George uses Bran to jump off from that point. It was the 9th year of summer. But why are we being told this information? Well, the BOV is Bran, and Bran is 7 years old, and he has spent his entire life in summer. We are hooked by Bran and who he is because he's riding among 20 men, and he's fundamentally going to see this man beheaded. So we're following along with Bran. We're interested in him. And so by explaining Bran's life, his 7 years, but then George uses that fact in order to establish this world building information. This would have nothing to do with the story right here, because we're seeing this man beheaded. It has nothing to do with this man being beheaded. But George has to world build because he's a writer and he's trying to build this epic fantasy. And there's this epic world that comes with it. In that context, the summer here is communicated by using Bran as a cue, as a jumping off point. So you need something to jump from, right? And so, of course, we see later into the story, we see later into the story, the deserter died bravely, Rob said. He was big and broad and growing every day with his mother's coloring, the fair skin, red-brown hair, and blue eyes of the Tullys of Riverrun. He had courage, at the least. No, Jon Snow said quietly, it was not courage. This one was dead of fear, right? So again, these people are much tougher. They are much more tradition-oriented. They kill you, they execute you, you died bravely. And another one is like, no, he died of fear. Exactly. And of course, you can read all of this for yourself, but fundamentally, it's a fantastic thing. So when you want to world build within your own story, you fundamentally need to find a cue. The cue has to hook the reader, and then you can explain away, right? Brandon Sanderson does this, for example, in the Stormlight Archive. In the prologue, there is a cue where the protagonist, the POV character, he goes and, he basically enters this corner, right? This assassin in white, he enters a corner and he gets ambushed. And Brandon Sanderson, literally in the prologue, goes ahead and explains the entire magic system to the reader. But of course, the reader is interested because they're interested in this assassin and what his capabilities are. So Brandon gets away with that. Yeah? And I like this story here, The Docks, from Omari Jenkins, because one thing he does very well is that he literally hooks you into his world and explains from that point, right? It was a noisy tri-day at the docks. The hustles and the bustles, the shouting and the singing, the prancing and the dancing, the lollygagging and the romancing, just like any other day. It was the best part of the day too, the almost done part, as the low tide began to pull in and the sun began to make his leaf, right? So you can see here the sun began to make his leaf, right? The sun is a guy. Anyways, Sid, get over here. So fundamentally, he does this a lot. Instead of breaking your back, hauling all of this, I will show you, for example, the first piece of world building that occurs really happens probably in the 4th page, 5th page. Then, by that point, he starts to talk about the world, and there is more world building shown. And here, for example, he has been able to hook his, Regia couldn't help but blush as Sid pulled her along. His strong sailor hands, his loose-fitting pantaloons, and his ragged workman shirt, dirty and worn with the smell of sea and decorated with scattered wood splinters. That is establishing an aesthetic about this life. Right? There is a specific level of romanticization, right? which means that fundamentally, if you are reading the story for this life, to see this, to go on this adventure, this is going to be very interesting for you, and you're now hooked in. It does, admittedly, it does take him 4 pages. Yes, I mean, he's not George R.R. Martin, but fundamentally, he's doing fantastic work. He knows to establish that aesthetic, right? He weren't just any regular old poor boy. He was a sailor, at least. That's what he told her, and managed to do a convincing enough job to make her believe that he was one of the few surviving souls of the great Narka treachery, and that he now only waited for recommission by the great Commodore, a new captain, by the great Commodore, a new captain, a new sheet boys, so that he could once again sail out into those mighty seas and fight back the self-righteous, self-loving, holy Emirate Empire from wave to port. From wave to port. You'll notice that the prose is fantastic in this story. I like this here, impulsive and totally uncaring about consequences. If the take was a sweet, if the take was a sweet, I like that. I think the wording. Another thing is the voice in this story is fantastic. The voice is very good. Jenkins can really write very unique voice, yeah? And so he uses similar technique here. I'm not sure if he's aware of it. I am aware of it, however. Exactly, it helps to know this stuff because technique is very good in this story. I would say, however, the characters, one thing about Song of Ice and Fire is that the characters from the first page in the prologue and the first page with Bran, they happen to have a significant depth to them. There has not been that much depth. The character of Sid is really surface level, and the other characters are not really any different. For example, Galvan, at least fundamentally from the 2 chapters I've read, they're not really that different. So I would say the character work can use a lot of improvement, but this is what I really wanted to, this is something that really, piqued my curiosity. Why? Because toward the end of chapter 2, I was like, wow, he's world building a lot, but I don't feel like this is info dumping. Why is that? And I want to really, I made this video to explain why that was not bad. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think of this story of Jenkins. The character quality, not that good. The prose is fantastic. The dialogue is fantastic. The world building is fantastic. A lot of this story is fantastic. It just requires some polishing, some additional work. I would say if I were to read the whole thing, I would really enjoy the whole way through. And that will be where I'll leave it today. Have a nice day. Bye. Hey, I edit stories. If you want me to edit your story professionally, you can check the channel page and to see how that works. The commissions are quite affordable. But also, if you want me to review a sample of your writing here on the channel, a sample, it's totally free. Drop it down here. I would love to see it.